Hello there and welcome to the Secrets of Organ Playing podcast. I'm your host, Vidas Pinkevičius. Today's guest is William Whitehead, an English organist, and he has gained a wide reputation for his engaging and inspiring interpretation of the organ repertoire. His concert career was given a boost when he won the first prize at the Odense International organ competition in Denmark 2004. Since then, he has traveled widely giving concerts in Europe and the US. Recent venues include St. Giles Cathedral, Edinburgh, Westminster Cathedral and Berlin Dome. A recorded artist on dozens of discs, he is most recently to be heard as organ soloist in Handel's Opus 7 No. 1 organ concerto with the Gabrieli Consort. His work as a continuo player brings him together with groups such as the Gabrieli Consort, the Orchestra and the Age of the Enlightenment and the Dunedin Consort. This year's proms saw him appear with the St. Petersburg Philharmonic Orchestra. Trained at Oxford University and the Royal Academy of Music, William Whitehead is now a sought-after organ teacher, teaching many students at both Oxford and Cambridge universities. Previously, he has held appointments as Assistant Organist at Rochester Cathedral and was a professor at both the Royal Academy of Music and Trinity College of Music. As curator of the Orgelbüchlein project, William Whitehead is seeing through a large-scale project to complete Bach's unfinished collection. This international project has already garnered much interest and is fast becoming a cross-section of the most interesting composers at work today. It will be published at Peter's edition. In this conversation, William is sharing his insights about the Orgelbüchlein projects, and the manuscript of Orgelbüchlein has 118 missing pieces, ghostly gaps with only the title penned by Bach. Each of these gaps will be filled by a new composition based on Bach's intended melody. The new pieces, written by the most interesting composers at work today, will survey a range of modern styles. The task for composers contributing to the Orgelbüchlein project is this: if Bach were alive today, how might he go about writing a short chorale prelude in the Orgelbüchlein style? So let's hear all about this fantastic project, and let's go to the show. So, William, I'm so delighted we're having this conversation finally. You first contacted me in early 2012, where you were just beginning to put this project together. So this new organ book, right? The new Orgelbüchlein that Bach didn't complete in time when he was alive. So here comes William, and he decides to continue the great Bach tradition and finish this project in the 21st century. Thank you so much for doing this, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to talk to you.
So, for starters, tell us a little bit, how did you come up with this idea? Who inspired you to pursue this project?
I can be very precise about that. It was almost exactly 10 years ago. I was teaching on a course for young organists in Oundle. It's a very well-known place, a beautiful place in England, in the middle of England, which has courses for young organists. And at the end of the week-long course, there is always a platform concert. The students give a concert. One of the students on this course said he would like to play one of his own compositions, and he played a very, very beautiful chorale prelude in Orgelbüchlein style, based on an English hymn. But I sat listening to it thinking, well, if this 17-year-old boy can write a beautiful Orgelbüchlein style piece, why can't lots of other composers, and why can't we complete the Orgelbüchlein?
Fantastic idea, right? We know that Bach completed only how many, 46 or 45 of them, 45. But planned over 100 and
64.
64, right? It's the exact number of titles that were written in before composition even began, right? So
Exactly.
each piece was supposed to be how much? 1 page in length, with some of exceptions, right?
Yes. There's some of them would have been longer. Some of the chorale melodies are really quite long. And indeed, sometimes he didn't plan enough space and he had to go on to the next page, or he had to paste in a little extra page. So it was a rather approximate guess he had to make when he laid out the plan.
Do you know what made him really stop composing? Do you know what really happened? Because we can speculate, of course. Maybe he got bored with 165 melodies, or maybe he got another project going on.
Yes, it's very difficult to say. We simply don't know. Lots of speculation, though, and I've even had some thoughts of my own. Because, of course, next year is the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. And it occurred to me that maybe Bach was even making a 200th anniversary tribute in 1717. And maybe time ran out, maybe he got another job. That's probably the most likely, that, in fact, he came to his time at Weimar came to an end, not exactly happily, and really his next job didn't require him to be producing these small chorales for the liturgy, so he simply abandoned the project. He took it up again later in Leipzig, of course, rather half-heartedly, and composed, I think, 2 more, and added the title page, but it really was a project that didn't, after 1717, it simply didn't come to fruition.
Right. Do you remember, William, what was the first chorale prelude that you heard in your lifetime as an organist? What was really the first inspiration for you?
In any terms, I think, I remember when I was a very young organist learning the Herzlich tut mich verlangen of Bach, and being very struck by the beautiful harmonies. I guess I was about 13 when I learned that, which is not from Orgelbüchlein, but it's a chorale in a similar style, I guess. But Orgelbüchlein, I suppose I came to a little bit later in my life, and I can't remember. Probably O Mensch Bewein is the first one I came across. It's, for many people, it must be the same. One of the most amazing chorales there is.
And a lot of people really do start organ playing, or at least Bach organ playing, with Orgelbüchlein preludes, which are not too easy, right, to handle at the beginning, right?
People say this, that if Bach explicitly on his title page is saying that this is a collection so that you can learn to play the organ. Today, of course, we have a very professionalized sense of learning the organ, and we have extremely good tutors, by which I mean books and people, who will guide new young organists through a very carefully crafted series of stages. But Orgelbüchlein really is still, if you can grapple with each of those chorales as a young learning organist, it's still, you will cover every aspect of technique that you need. So it may not be like an ABC for a very young child, but it's certainly a wonderful way to learn the organ. And I'm sure Bach's pupils copied these pieces and took them away and simply applied themselves to playing the organ until they could play it.
Right, and we have to probably mention Marcel Dupre's 79 chorales, which he thought would be like a preparatory work before jumping into Orgelbüchlein, right?
Right.
Which are easier.
Yes, indeed. And you think of other collections like the Brahms 11 chorale preludes, I think it's 11, isn't it? And the Reger, I can't remember which opus number it is.
135A.
Well done. So again, very small pieces in a very similar style and probably for very similar uses as Bach's Orgelbüchlein.
Exactly. So for me, I remember I started organ playing, and my first organ teacher gave me this entire collection and said, "Go ahead and pick some organ chorale, for yourself." And I was about 16 years old. It couldn't really sight read very well, and took this collection at home and played it on the piano, without any pedals, and tried to grasp all the intricacies of the pedal work as well into only the finger part, and it was very, very difficult. I remember at that time. And the first one that I really played, I think, was Ich ruf zu dir. Ich ruf zu dir. That's like a trio texture, but it's a simple enough because the repeated bass sort of melody in the pedals is sort of manageable, and each hand has its own melody. So it was a wise choice from my teacher, I think.
Yes.
Because there are even this Orgelbüchlein, right? It's not very easy, right? Because it's extremely slow. It's extremely slow tempo, and you have to feel the flow. Nevertheless.
Yes. Indeed, and to make it sing and breathe and to ornament it beautifully, I think, of course, on paper it's not so difficult, but in reality it's really very difficult to make it sound good. But I was thinking of one of the early ones. I think it's the second one in the collection, Gott durch deine Güte, which is a canon.
Right.
It's extremely difficult. It's really, of course, it depends what speed you play it, but to play the canon, with one part in the pedal and one part in the right hand, with running quavers in between, it's a really technically difficult piece.
So today in the 21st century, people use that collection not only to play the organ, right, to master the organ playing skills, but maybe to have some idea at composition, right? They use the techniques and figurations, right, imitations that are present into original piece, and try to, I don't know, put it into another piece, another tune, right, and make it sound like a new. I remember doing those exercises. Quite fascinated me, this type of approach. Did you try it yourself, this kind of practice?
Yeah. Yes, a little bit as a composer, but and indeed, yes, they are wonderful example pieces for, well, principally three types of composition. So the very simple, sometimes called cancional style, where the tune is absolutely plain and simple, almost like you would find in a hymnal. And then the motifs and the figuration weaves around the tune. Then, of course, you have the canons. I think there are 12 of them, about 12 in Orgelbuchlein. Is there some symbolism there, perhaps? And then, like Orgelbüchlein, the ornamented chorales. So three very different ways of thinking musically, and three different ways of tying together a very small piece.
And those three types of techniques could have been used very easily in those days as a chorale introduction, right? Probably like before a congregational singing, right? Do you think that Bach himself used that kind of approach when he practiced and played and performed during services in, let's say, Arnstadt, or even later in Weimar, right?
Yes, I'm sure that's what they're for. There's all sorts of talk. Of course, we don't exactly know what these pieces are for, and indeed they don't need to be for one thing alone. But I think in practical terms, they are certainly preludes to the singing of a chorale, and in that, my thinking is enhanced. I'm just going to reach for a book in my bookcase, but the Johann Christoph Bach, who wrote his 44 Choräle zum Präambulieren, so chorales for preluding, and they are, one can only be slightly cruel to Johann Christoph Bach. They're very simple and very basic pieces, and I'm sure that Johann Sebastian Bach is gently saying, this is what you can really do. You can make the texture much richer, much more interesting, really make a true composition rather than a small and a piece which doesn't go anywhere. They're fascinating little pieces. Johann Christoph Bach, of course, was Johann Sebastian's uncle and probably his first teacher in Eisenach. So it's a fairly direct connection, I think. But of course, these Orgelbüchlein pieces can be used as meditations. They could be used for private devotion. They, as you said, they might well be composition exercises. They might be pedagogical exercises. And why shouldn't they be all of those things?
Right, and throughout the centuries, right, from the 1717, at least the first half of the 18th century, composers loved this idea of taking a chorale melody and putting into the larger piece, right? Not necessarily a well-extended piece like Leipzig chorale preludes or even Schubler types of with ritornellos and recurring melodies, refrains, right? But shorter, as you say, and Reger, Brahms, right? And I wonder, did they get this idea from those masters like Bach himself, or did they have their own ideas also throughout the centuries?
Well, I think everything is present in Bach. He's such a composer who discovered all paths before we did. But I think there's quite a difference between these little Orgelbüchlein pieces and the various different types of chorale treatment within Bach. So, as you say, the Leipzig chorales, which have a completely different ambition and set out absolutely to be an artistic exploration of the chorale. Fantasia, of course, becomes, the chorale Fantasia, as was very present with Buxtehude, but Bach is picking up on that idea, which again is very different from Orgelbüchlein. And I suppose, I don't know, I've never really thought this through, but the enormous pieces of, say, Max Reger, where he's using a chorale, it could spring out of the Leipzig chorales eventually, but or even the Liszt ad nos, the idea of what can happen to a chorale theme, even if it's a secular chorale, over the course of the piece.
It's all connected in my mind too. That the smallest possible form probably is Orgelbüchlein chorale, right? With some figurations in middle voices, right? And the main chorale present in the top voice in general, right? And then what happens after that? If you want to expand this model, you add what? Ritornellos. You add the introduction, which is a recurring melody in different maybe versions, different keys, maybe shortened, maybe with sequences leading up to another key with modulations. From the same model, you can build a longer, like a Leipzig chorale, right? And it's not that very far from chorale Fantasia, because in chorale Fantasia you explore different types of chorale settings, right? The chorale prelude settings, echoes, right? Chorale variations, versets, fuguettes, everything put together, right? And you just make a very large piece, right? So it was very pedagogical idea that Bach had in mind, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. That's I call these little Orgelbüchlein pieces musical espresso shots, because everything is in there. It's just very, very concentrated. Really big pieces in a small skin.
And imagine today in 21st century, when we have those 45 complete examples that Bach himself wrote, right? What would happen if somebody would love to improvise like that, right? Or even compose a longer piece like a Fantasia, and not necessarily take one model as an example, but a few, like five perhaps, with different techniques that Bach himself used, and treat one phrase of the chorale using one model, another phrase using another, and so forth, and if that would be expanded even in the 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
I bet somebody of your composers for the new project used similar ideas, don't you think?
Yes, indeed. That's been a really interesting thing about running this project, that some composers have stayed quite close to Bach and his techniques, so presenting the tune very simply. Or in canon, I have a wonderful example by the Danish composer John Franzen, who's written a canon at the tritone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's exactly like Bach, but just in a more modernistic fashion. Then not so many composers, but I'm encouraging more composers in the Orgelbüchlein project to take an ornamented form of the chorale. The French composer Vincent Paulet has done a beautiful one of those, and a British composer Francis Greer, a really beautiful adaptation of the Bach ideal of just decorating that chorale melody in the right hand. Then, of course, other composers have developed the techniques even further and taken more modernistic techniques, which Bach, well, who knows, but he would have not recognized at first sight, but then he would have looked a little harder and said, oh, yes, I see what's happened here. Mm-hmm. So things like isorhythm, so rhythmicizing the melody in a slightly different way. French composer Jacques Pichard did a really interesting one in which he took the notes of the chorale melody but felt free to add sharps and flats or naturals. So really it no longer quite sounds like the chorale melody, but it is there. It is manifestly on the page. It looks like the chorale melody. Yes, another one who really entered into the spirit of, I suppose you call it dodecaphonic music, so serial music, and the chorale is present in many different layers throughout the piece, in retrograde and inversions, inverted retrogrades, so really making a sort of very dense technical statement of the early 20th century, but it still looks like a piece of Orgelbuchlein. It's of the same scale, and the chorale melody is everywhere. So Bach may have recognized exactly what was going on in that piece.
Well, and of course the French composers like Thierry Esquèche, right? I've heard a few of them of the settings from your project, and I thought, well, that's a very unique style that he himself uses, and very true for himself. It stays in the French tradition.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Thierry's piece goes more in the direction of Fantasia, which of course is a very small. There's a small opening of the door by Bach in Orgelbuchlein with In dir ist Freude, so the very well-known and really quite long setting of the New Year chorale, where the chorale isn't presented simply. It is chopped up. It is done more in a Fantasia style. So I've allowed a few composers to go in that direction.
Mm-hmm. And when you were contacting those composers, were you laying out the principles behind their compositions, or just the hymn tunes that they should take and treat them as freely as they want?
No, the brief for writing for the project is I try to be as specific as I can be without completely restricting the composer's creativity. It's a very difficult brief, actually. So I do ask composers to write something which reflects the ethos of Orgelbüchlein broadly, perhaps also reflecting the density of technique and affect. You have to bear in mind some composers are already lost because they don't know, if they aren't organists or if they don't know their Bach well. I do encourage them to go and look at their Bach and learn from him first of all. But then yes, it's a question of writing a very small piece. Recently, I've been asking composers to try to make the melody structural. So, in fact, it's really given once through. Now, whether the melody is stretched or decorated or adapted doesn't matter so much. But, of course, so many of Bach's Orgelbüchlein pieces, the melody is simply given once through. In fact, the very first thing we hear, usually in Bach's Orgelbüchlein, is the first note of the chorale melody. Usually on its own. So that sort of very pared down, very dense, very tight structure is what I'm encouraging composers to do. And most of them absolutely understand it and get that. It's for some of composers, it's, I know, been a very difficult task. They've really struggled to contain their creativity into this 2-minute form. Others have found it extremely easy and indeed an inspiration to creativity.
Fantastic. The way we reconnected in 2016, William, is through the Dutch composer Ad Wames, right? Who took part in your project as well. And he mentioned that I should take a look at your project for this podcast. And of course, I remembered, yes, you contacted me in 2012. And Ad Wames sent me his setting for your project, Christ der du bist der helle Tag. And I played it in my church on my organ, and it's a beautiful 2-page piece, and it's very, very I would say tonal, but minimalistic, like all of or most of the Ad's compositions, and it suits, I think, the medium, the organ well. What do you think about Ad Wames?
Yes, I think, well, you're right. It's in that the Dutch minimal style, if you like. I think there's also a kind of pop music element to it, which I'm delighted to have in the project, where, you know, the bass line and the melodies are very rooted and very simple, but, you know, that's what 95% of the world listens to, and why not have, as it were, a pop music angle on the Orgelbüchlein task? It's a very beautiful piece.
And it's not too long to have this in one mode, right? In F minor, right? I don't think there are. Oh, there is just E natural, like a raised 7 scale degree there in a couple of places. I think 2 places total. But everything else is just with 4 flats, like in normal natural F minor mode. And I thought maybe it is a little bit of the too monotonic, but when you play it and it lasts only how many, maybe 2 minutes, right, or 2.5 minutes, it's not a very long period of time to get immersed into one mode, one particular color. And I guess it was a very suitable choice that Ad chose.
Yes, indeed. And it's interesting that his now departed compatriot Jacques van Oortmessen, who wrote a piece for the project some years ago now, again in a minimal style, if you like, very different to Ad's piece, with moving figuration in the hands and the tune actually in double pedal. But there, it's a very brilliant recreation of Orgelbüchlein technique. The tune is in fact motivically everywhere. You hear it as a very simple piece, but actually it's worked. It's very well worked, like Ad's piece.
And what about Lithuanian composers? Did you find some?
Yes, indeed. So far, 2. Jonas Jurkunas and Justa Janulite, right. I pronounce it right, who I think it's maybe 3 years ago now, we with a collaboration with the Spitalfields Festival in London, we heard their pieces, very different pieces. Jonas wrote a piece with very almost mechanistic repetitive patterns. His chorale was An Wasserflüssen Babylon, so he obviously picked up the idea of water flowing and that kind of motion written into music, and the tune is in the pedals. And Juster wrote something very different, very beautiful piece with sustained, overlapping, rather free presentation of the chorale, which works very beautifully.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I've read actually about your project in Lithuanian media too, featuring those two composers, Jonas and Juste. They are from the younger generation, I guess, right? And the press was very inspired by this idea that Bach collection got continued in the 21st century, and Lithuanians took also part in this.
Yes, I'm delighted. That's that's really the spirit of the project. That, of course, I have a complete range of ages of composers, but younger generation and what they can contribute and their vision of this task of writing a small chorale.
Talking about the nationalities and the range of generations, have you counted how many countries are represented?
I haven't counted, but we have many European countries. I have one contribution from the United States, Nico Muley. But I could do a quick calculation, and I would guess that within the project we have about 20 different countries. And the newest edition would be a Hungarian. Zsigmond Shatmari has written a very beautiful piece, which just arrived in my inbox. And I'm still looking to expand it. The project is moving towards its end, June 2018 it should be finished, so it's really the last 20 or so commissions happening now, and I'm talking to various composers, an Italian at least, a Finnish composer, so it may be that the family of countries grows even further.
Fantastic. It's a very global world right now, right? And people from different continents can share their ideas through technological advances. And I guess you will have this project also recorded, right? And presented in public. I know at least part of that already was publicly performed. So can you talk a little bit what will come out of this project once it's done and when it's printed as a piece?
So the first task is to get it printed. So Edition Peters will be publishing it. It's really quite a lot of music, so it's going to be 6 volumes, and we will include the original Bach so that the collection has a feeling of completeness, so that you turn the page and it's Jonas Jurkonas, you turn the page and there is Bach, and you see the pieces sitting right next to each other. So 6 volumes over the next 2 years. We're hoping the first one will be out in January next year. It's actually going to be volume 4. That's the most complete one, so we had to start there. Indeed, complete performances. It's a slightly strange concert experience in some ways, but actually putting these very small pieces back to back in concert it works rather well. In the Edinburgh Festival last year, we played the whole of Bach's Orgelbüchlein with, I think, 12 of the new compositions. And the rhythm of the concert is not like you expect, because it's very, very short pieces, but it does have a rhythm. And so we are looking at various ways of putting on complete performance. It's going to be about 8 hours of music altogether. So it's one long concert or several shorter ones. And certainly I have several festivals around Europe interested, and it'll happen in Turin, in the Thüringer Bachwochen in Germany. Perhaps in France, the Toulouse Les Orgues Festival may take it, and I hope in London. But it's going to need several different organists because it is a lot of music, and a lot of music, some of which is of great technical difficulty. So it's not a job for one person. I certainly wouldn't want to take on the whole thing. But yes, I'm very open to talking to other festivals who might be interested in presenting the complete Orgelbüchlein when it's done. And recording, yes, the problem is time. It's just me running the project. I have a small group of trustees who help me, but trying to organize the recording too it's happening, but it's trying to find money inevitably and a way to present it, and maybe presenting it in new ways so that it's online, or maybe it's simply free access on a website, because the world is very different these days. The market is completely different to how it used to be.
Exactly, William. And keeping this in mind, have you thought about microfinancing platforms like Kickstarter?
Yes, that's been suggested many a time, and all I need is a campaign manager.
yeah. But what happens with Kickstarter or Indiegogo or other platforms like that? Your fans, and I'm sure you have thousands of them around the world now, will be delighted to get involved in this project by supporting it a little bit. So what you could offer, of course, the CD or DVD of the final product, and in exchange they would donate, something for your project, which takes the burden out of big financial commitment from one agency, from state support, from municipality, from businesses, right? And now these days, if you have a compelling idea, and I believe you do, with the new Orgelbüchlein, your idea can have wings, and can spread. And keeping this in mind, microfinancing is an option. It's sometimes even possible even to restore organs using microfinancing. Yeah, I know that, but it's more difficult because maybe larger sums of money are needed. But if you have this amazing idea and you present it in the right way, and maybe structure it in parts, not necessarily the whole idea, but as you say, volumes, 1, 2, 3, 4, that might be, in your case, real good chance of getting support. And I know few state films, who from England, they do fantastic documentaries. I don't think they use the same platform as I'm talking about, but they use a similar approach. They have backers and supporters and
pledges. Subscription model, isn't it?
Subscription,
people, like it was in the 19th century, you sign up to be a subscriber and pay a certain amount of money, but then you're one of the major supporters of the project. Yes, no, we're considering all sorts of things for ways to get it recorded.
Right, fantastic. So, what's next then for you? For example, in the summer of 2016, what are you planning to do with this project?
Because there are compositions appearing all the time, there are certainly I am playing new pieces in various concerts. So in September we have a new piece by British composer Sally Beamish. So I'll be playing that up in Scotland in the Lammermuir Festival. The project continues, and it's not always me playing the new pieces. In fact, this Sunday we have a premiere of another British composer, Tarek O'Regan. He'll be played by Joseph Wicks at St John's College, Cambridge. The website, the project website, is also very collaborative. So I have people can submit listings for their concert diary, and so there are concerts going on all the time of people playing the project pieces. I should say there's also the sort of second dimension to the project, the Orgelbüchlein community, where anybody anywhere in the world can write a piece and submit it, and I will post it up on the website. And I have some really very interesting compositions have come out of this community forum from all over the world. There are two people who I think have it as an ambition to write every chorale, all 164, or I should say 118, the missing chorales. There's a Russian doctor, he's from the south of Russia somewhere, who has submitted dozens of them, and they're all there on the Orgelbuchlein community. I think his story must be fascinating. We've exchanged some emails, but I have a man in Germany who has severe cerebral palsy who has submitted one or two. So it's certainly the people who've become interested in this project and written pieces is very broad, and I'm really thrilled that it's become it's enthused people to write pieces in this style. And indeed, some of the pieces from the Orgelbuchlein community I will be able to use in the project itself and the publication. So I love the idea that there are backroom Bachs around the world who may not be a professional musician but have worked out a way to produce a very beautiful composition, which I'm thrilled to be able to publish.
And on your website, of the project website, do you have hymn tunes listed that people can work with?
Yes, on the website there's a melodic sources area. This has been again a fascinating area of discovery, because really not many people have looked into these missing melodies in Orgelbüchlein. Of course, the ones which Bach composed are well known and well researched. But together with my academic advisor, John Scott Whiteley, he has unearthed all sorts of very interesting new information. I think he will eventually publish in the Bach scholarship journals about this, working out which hymnals are relevant and which hymnals Bach might have known, finding out all sorts of things. He keeps some of it secret from me because he's made some astonishing discoveries, and I think it'll be quite big news. So that's been an unexpected spin-off from the project. Some of the melodies have been very difficult to find. They went out of fashion very quickly after Bach's time, and they were perhaps really quite localized anyway, Thuringian tunes which didn't have wide distribution around Germany. So absolutely fascinating.
And of course, I guess you have plans probably to perform the chorales themselves in addition to the settings that people create. Wouldn't that be a great idea in addition for the complete organ piece, you have a choral representation of that, right?
Well, certainly in many concerts over the years, that's been a really good way to form a little section of a concert. Mm-hmm. In fact, in September, I'm working with a choir, the Phoenix Singers, and they will sing some of the chorales, and I will play actually some Bach and some of the new pieces. There are all sorts of interesting cross pollinations. Some of the chorales that Bach set elsewhere. So the one in his motet Der Geist hilft is one of the missing ones in Orgelbüchlein that hasn't yet been composed, but it will make an obvious concert program, if you like. The chorale from Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, that unbelievably well-known choral piece, that is in Orgelbüchlein, known as Werder Munter. Mm-hmm. Dick Cormans, another Dutch composer, wrote a beautiful setting for that. So again, this collection will provide lots of material for interesting concert programs, undoubtedly.
And how Royal College of Organists reacts to this?
Well, they've been involved. They've commissioned 2 pieces, I think, and we may have further collaborations. Yes, the college has been very supportive. They commissioned a Belgian composer, the first Belgian contribution I had, Joris Verdun. He wrote a very beautiful. It's difficult to describe. It's if one thinks of Arvo Pärt style, it's not so far from that. Very still, using similar techniques to draw out quite simple harmonies, but quite telling harmonies. Very expressive too.
So fantastic. I think people from around the world now who will be listening to you with these ideas will get a better feeling of the massive scale this project is, right? And even in Bach's day, what it meant for Bach to complete the entire project. You mentioned this Russian doctor, right, who himself is trying to follow Bach's footsteps, right?
I think so.
But it's a really massive undertaking. If Bach himself would have been only solo composer alone doing this, but today we can collaborate, and it's a very, very fascinating idea.
I don't think any of my contemporary composers have written as fast as Bach. You can see from his handwriting in the manuscript, which is a beautiful thing, that some of them are beautifully presented. They're clearly fair copy, but some of them were done in a great hurry, and you see that on the page.
So you mean in the same collection that sometimes it's a fair copy, but sometimes it's a working copy, right?
Yes. I'm not an expert on handwriting, but that's certainly this manuscript was a sketchbook as much as a receptacle for fair copies. One imagines that Bach's pupils would have copied the fair copies. Perhaps they would have made fair copies of the ones which weren't, but it's very much a working manuscript.
So, William, tell us, we are very eager to hear where to find you and your project online. So,
the website is the main portal, if you like, for the project, and that's www.orgelbuchlein.com, and that's ORGELBUECHLEIN, I think I spelled it right, .com. That shows all the things we've talked about. There are some of the new compositions available freely for download. The Orgelbüchlein community is there for people can submit to it or indeed download from it. The melodic sources is still a work in progress, but I would say 2/3 of the missing melodies are there, ready for a composer to take up the task. And there is other information about Orgelbüchlein and the project. So that's, yes, I do encourage people to log on and have a look and get involved.
Fantastic. I'll make sure they will get this information, and I'll put the link into the description of this podcast. Fantastic. Thank you so much, William, for being so generous with your time, your ideas.
My pleasure.
And keep pushing the boundaries, keep continuing the great Bach tradition into the 21st century. I think it's worth it, although it's not very easy.
It's not easy, but it is. It's become a very rewarding project to be involved with. So I'm delighted I started it, and when it's available and ready for the world to play and enjoy, I'll be very proud.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Vidas.
If you liked this conversation, I encourage you to visit my blog Secrets of Organ Playing at organduo.lt, where you will find lots of insights, practical advice, and training for every area of organ playing. You can subscribe to this blog for free to get your daily dose of inspiration and to be the first to know when any of my future podcasts roll out. I hope to help you reach your dreams in organ playing. I'm Vidas Pinkevičius. Thanks for listening. and we'll catch you online really soon.